Picture this. It's a freezing January night in 1510, deep within the stone walls of Westminster Palace. The air is thick with incense and prayer. Somewhere in the shadows, a woman's screams pierce through velvet curtains. But these aren't screams of triumph. These are the screams of catastrophe. A 24-year-old queen, drenched in sweat and blood, delivers not the golden prince England has been waiting for, but a silent, lifeless baby girl. 7 months too early. Blue skin, no breath, no cry, just devastating, suffocating silence. And in that moment, Catherine of Aragon's nightmare begins. A nightmare that will stretch across 9 agonizing years, consume 6 pregnancies, claim the lives of at least 5 babies, and ultimately tear apart not just a marriage but an entire religion. This is the story of how one woman's womb became the battlefield that reshaped England forever. January 31st, 1510. The court is celebrating what they think is the beginning of a new dynasty. Catherine, the Spanish princess who married the dashing young King Henry VIII just 7 months earlier, is pregnant. England needs an heir. The Tudor line, barely 25 years old, is fragile. Civil wars have ravaged the kingdom for decades. Everyone remembers the chaos, the bloodshed, the uncertainty. A royal baby means stability. A royal baby means peace. A royal baby means the future. But Catherine's body has other plans. She goes into labor prematurely. The medical knowledge of the time is primitive, brutal. There are no ultrasounds, no emergency C-sections, no NICU units. There's just a darkened chamber, midwives with dirty hands, prayer beads, and hope. When the baby arrives, that hope shatters like glass. A stillborn daughter. Catherine is destroyed. She writes to her father, King Ferdinand of Spain, and her words are soaked in guilt and shame. She begs him not to be angry with her. She insists it's God's will. She repeats it like a mantra, trying to convince herself. It's God's will. It's God's will. But deep down, she knows what everyone is thinking. She has failed, but Catherine is young. Henry is young. They're in love. The king, just 18 years old, handsome, athletic, brilliant, takes the loss with grace. He doesn't blame her. Not yet. He comforts her. He tells her they'll try again. And they do. Within weeks, she's pregnant again. By May, just 4 months later, ambassadors are reporting that the queen is very large with child. It's almost impossible. The timeline doesn't quite make sense. But in an era where pregnancy is shrouded in mystery and superstition, no one questions it too closely. All that matters is that Catherine is carrying another child. This time it has to work. This time God will smile on them. New Year's Day, 1511. Just after midnight, Catherine gives birth to a son, a living, breathing, screaming baby boy. They name him Henry after his father. The kingdom explodes with joy. Bonfires blaze in the streets of London. Free wine flows from public fountains. Church bells ring across the land. In the great halls of Westminster, a magnificent tournament is planned. Henry VIII rides into the arena wearing armor emblazoned with his wife's initial, the letter K. He jousts with the ferocity of a man who has finally secured his legacy. For 52 days, England has a prince. For 52 days, the future looks bright. And then, without warning, without explanation, the baby dies. Just like that, one moment he's alive, the next he's gone, crib death they might call it today. Back then, it's simply the will of God, but God's will is starting to look suspiciously cruel. Henry, ever the king, keeps his composure in public. He doesn't weep openly. He doesn't rage. Kings don't do that, but Catherine, she crumbles. She is, as the chroniclers note, like a natural woman. She mourns. She grieves. She blames herself. The whispers start, quiet at first, just murmurs among the ladies of the court, the nobles in the corridors. Why can't the queen keep a child alive? Is she cursed? Is she doing something wrong? Catherine hears them. She feels them like knives. And so she does what she's always done when faced with pain. She turns to God. She fasts. She prays for hours on her knees until they're bruised and bloody. She wears a hair shirt beneath her royal gowns, scratching her skin raw as penance for sins she doesn't even understand. She believes that if she suffers enough, If she purifies herself enough, God will finally grant her a healthy son. But her body, already weakened by grief and rapid pregnancies, is paying a terrible price. By September of 1510, there are rumors of another pregnancy, but nothing comes of it. Either it was a false hope or she miscarried so early that no one recorded it. Then, in June of 1513, Henry goes to war against France. Catherine, heavily pregnant again, is left behind as regent. She's not just a queen, she's ruling England. And when Scotland, France's ally, invades from the north, Catherine doesn't cower. She rides to Buckingham, stands before the assembled troops, and delivers a speech so stirring, so powerful, that the soldiers march off to the Battle of Flodden and destroy the Scottish army. It's one of the greatest military victories in English history. Catherine sends the bloodied coat of the dead Scottish king to her husband in France as a trophy. She's a warrior queen. She's magnificent. But in October, while Henry is still celebrating his victories abroad, Catherine goes into premature labor again. Another son, another death. He lives just hours, maybe minutes. The records are vague, as if the scribes themselves couldn't bear to write down the details. 1514, another pregnancy. By July, Catherine knows she's carrying a child again. By November, it's over. Some sources say she delivered a stillborn boy at 8 months. Others say she miscarried due to the stress of a political crisis between her husband and her father. The court is swirling with tension. Henry is growing frustrated with Spain. Ambassadors report that his love for Catherine is cooling, and every failed pregnancy makes it worse. In an age where a woman's value is measured by her ability to produce heirs, Catherine is becoming a liability. She's only in her late 20s, but the constant cycle of pregnancy, loss, grief, and guilt is aging her rapidly. Observers begin to describe her as rather ugly than otherwise. Her body, once plump and beautiful, is changing. Her face is drawn, her eyes haunted. She looks older than her years. And Henry, young and virile and increasingly aware of his own power, is starting to look elsewhere. But then, in 1516, a miracle. Catherine gives birth to a healthy baby. It's a girl. They name her Mary. She's tiny but strong. She survives the crucial first days, then weeks, then months. Catherine is overjoyed. Finally, she has a living child, but the kingdom is not. England wanted a prince. A daughter cannot inherit the throne. Not really. Not without causing chaos. The last time a woman tried to rule England, it triggered a civil war. Henry, however, puts on a brave face. He tells the Venetian ambassadors that Mary is just the beginning. "We are both young," he says. "If it was a daughter this time, by the grace of God the sons will follow." He believes it. Catherine believes it. They have to. 1517. There are whispers of another pregnancy, but nothing is confirmed. Then, in February of 1518, Catherine conceives again. She's 32 now, older by the standards of the time, but still hopeful. This time, she keeps the pregnancy secret for months, perhaps afraid to jinx it, perhaps afraid to raise hopes that will be crushed again. But by July, when Henry comes to visit her at Woodstock Palace, she greets him at the door with her belly visibly swollen. She tells him the baby has quickened. It's moving inside her. It's alive. Henry is thrilled. He throws a banquet. He writes to his chief minister, Cardinal Wolsey, expressing his hope but also his caution. He knows by now that nothing is certain. He refuses to move Catherine, afraid that travel might trigger another disaster. He's learned to temper his expectations, but deep down he's desperate. He needs a son. The pressure is unbearable. For both of them. November 9th, 1518. Catherine goes into labor. It's her 8th month again, premature again. The baby is a girl again, and she's stillborn again. The Venetian ambassador writes that the news was delivered to the vexation of everybody. The kingdom, he says, had never desired anything as desperately as it desired a prince. And once again, Catherine has failed to deliver. This is her last pregnancy. After 9 years of marriage, after at least 6 confirmed pregnancies, possibly more, she has one living child, a daughter. By 1525, it's clear that Catherine, now nearly 40, is past childbearing age. The dream of a male heir is dead, and with it, Catherine's marriage begins to die too. But here's where the story gets even darker, because Henry doesn't just want a divorce. He wants to rewrite history. He starts reading his Bible. He finds a passage in Leviticus, chapter 20, verse 21. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. And Henry has an epiphany, or perhaps a convenient excuse. Catherine was married before, to his older brother Arthur. They were wed in 1501 when Catherine was just 15 and Arthur was also 15. But Arthur died 5 months later, probably from the sweating sickness. The marriage was never consummated. Catherine always insisted. She came to Henry as a virgin. The Pope himself granted a special dispensation allowing her to marry her deceased husband's brother. It was all legal, all blessed by the Church. But now, Henry decides it was all a lie. He convinces himself that Catherine and Arthur did consummate their marriage. He convinces himself that he has been living in sin for 20 years. He convinces himself that God has been punishing him with dead babies and no sons because his marriage was cursed from the start. And he makes this argument publicly, loudly, repeatedly. He drags his wife's name through the mud. He questions her virtue, her honesty, her chastity. He puts her on trial. He demands that the Pope annul the marriage. Catherine, dignified and defiant to the end, refuses to go quietly. She insists she came to Henry as a virgin. She insists their marriage is valid. She will not be cast aside. She will not let her daughter be declared illegitimate. The case drags on for years, and when Pope Clement VII refuses to annul the marriage, Henry does the unthinkable. He breaks from Rome. In 1533, he declares himself supreme head of the Church of England. He severs England's thousand-year connection to the Catholic Church. He creates a new religion. He marries Anne Boleyn, a young woman he's been pursuing for years, and he casts Catherine aside, stripping her of her title, her household, her dignity. She's no longer queen. She's just the Dowager Princess of Wales, Arthur's widow. She's exiled to a series of cold, damp castles. She's forbidden from seeing her daughter. She dies in 1536, alone, humiliated, but still insisting to her last breath that she was Henry's true wife and queen. The irony is almost unbearable. Because Anne Boleyn, the woman Henry moves heaven and earth to marry, the woman for whom he splits a church and rewrites a nation's faith, also fails to give him a son. She has one healthy daughter, Elizabeth, then a miscarriage, then another. And when she miscarries a male fetus in January of 1536, Henry has her arrested on false charges of adultery, incest, and treason. 4 months after Catherine's death, Anne Boleyn is beheaded on Tower Green. Her head rolls. Henry moves on. He marries Jane Seymour, who finally gives him a son, Edward, but dies 12 days later from complications. He marries Anne of Cleves, divorces her after 6 months. He marries Catherine Howard, executes her for adultery. He marries Catherine Parr, who survives him only because he dies first. 6 wives, 3 named Catherine, 2 executed. 1 dies in childbirth. All in the shadow of that first Catherine, the Spanish princess who loved him, who bore his children, who lost them one by one, and who became the unintended architect of the English Reformation. Modern historians have spent decades trying to understand why Catherine lost so many babies. Was it Henry's fault? Some researchers have suggested he had a blood disorder, possibly Kell antigen or McLeod syndrome, that would have caused his partner's pregnancies to fail repeatedly. But the evidence is mixed. Henry fathered at least one healthy illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, by his mistress Bessie Blount, and possibly other children who survived to adulthood. So clearly he was capable of producing viable offspring. Was it Catherine's fault then? Her intense religious fasting during pregnancy certainly didn't help. Malnutrition, especially in the first trimester, can cause devastating birth defects and miscarriages. Some historians have even speculated that Catherine suffered from an eating disorder, a form of anorexia driven by religious perfectionism and guilt. Every time she lost a baby, she fasted harder, prayed longer, punished herself more severely. It became a vicious cycle. Stress, too, played a role. The constant pressure to produce a male heir, the whispers of the court, the visible disappointment on her husband's face every time she failed. That kind of psychological torment takes a physical toll. And then there's simple bad luck. Infant and maternal mortality rates in the 16th century were staggering. Even healthy pregnancies ended in tragedy far more often than they do today. Poor hygiene, lack of medical knowledge, and the brutal practices of Tudor midwifery killed countless mothers and babies. Catherine was living in a world where childbirth was one of the leading causes of death for women. Every pregnancy was a gamble, and she lost that gamble 5 times out of 6. But here's the thing. None of that mattered to Henry. None of it mattered to the court. None of it mattered to the kingdom. Because in the world of the 1500s, a queen had one job: produce sons. Everything else was secondary. Catherine's intelligence, her political skill, her courage, her loyalty, none of it could compensate for her inability to deliver a living male heir. And so she was discarded, replaced, erased. Her legacy reduced to a single word: failure. Except, of course, her legacy is so much bigger than that. Because the daughter she did manage to bring into the world, the one surviving child out of 6 pregnancies, that little girl named Mary, grew up to become England's first reigning queen. Mary the First, Bloody Mary, as history would remember her. The woman who tried desperately to undo her father's Reformation, to bring England back to Catholicism, and who burned hundreds of Protestants at the stake in the process. And Mary's reign, as brutal and controversial as it was, paved the way for her younger half-sister, Elizabeth, Anne Boleyn's daughter, the daughter Henry almost didn't live to see grow up. Elizabeth I, who would become one of the greatest monarchs in English history, ruling for 45 years, defeating the Spanish Armada, presiding over the English Renaissance, and dying childless, deliberately, ending the Tudor line on her own terms. So in a strange, twisted way, Catherine's suffering had meaning. Her failure to produce a son led to the English Reformation. The English Reformation led to centuries of religious conflict, political upheaval, and cultural transformation. It reshaped the monarchy. It redefined the relationship between church and state. It gave birth to Anglicanism, to Puritanism, to the English colonization of the New World. It influenced the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, the modern concept of separation of church and state. All because a Spanish princess couldn't keep her babies alive. All because a king decided that his lack of a son was God's punishment for a sin he may not have even committed. All because a marriage, built on love and hope and political alliance, collapsed under the weight of grief and desperation and patriarchal obsession. And Catherine herself, she never stopped loving Henry. Even after he humiliated her, divorced her, exiled her, took away her child, stripped her of her title, she still referred to herself as his wife. She still signed her letters Catharine the Queen. She still wore her wedding ring. On her deathbed, weak and sick and abandoned, she wrote him one final letter. She forgave him. She prayed for him. She told him she was still his loyal wife. It's heartbreaking. It's infuriating. It's one of the most tragic love stories in history, because Henry didn't deserve her loyalty. He didn't deserve her love. He certainly didn't deserve her suffering. But she gave it all anyway because that's what women of her era were taught to do: endure, sacrifice, forgive, and die quietly without complaint. The royal chambers where Catherine labored and lost her babies are long gone. Westminster Palace burned down centuries ago. Hampton Court still stands, but the rooms where she prayed and wept have been remodeled, repurposed, emptied of ghosts. There are no memorials to the stillborn princes and princesses. No plaques marking the spots where they drew their first and last breaths. History has moved on. But if you listen closely, if you walk through those old corridors late at night when the tourists are gone, you might still hear the echoes. The screams of a woman in labor. the silence of a baby that never cried, the whispered prayers of a queen who believed, right up until the end, that if she just suffered enough, if she just prayed hard enough, if she just loved hard enough, God would finally give her what she desperately needed. A son, a future, a purpose. But God or fate or biology or bad luck had other plans, and those plans, brutal and merciless as they were, changed the world forever.